welcome to my channel, and today we'll be talking about the Murder on the Orient Express chapters 10 to 12, or in other words, it's part 2, chapters 2, 3, and 4. So let's get right into it, and first we're gonna start with chapter 10 or chapter 2 of part 2 of Murder on the Orient Express. Let's get right into it. Okay, so how does this chapter 10 starts? Well, we have the detective calling again Mr. McQueen for a second interview in which he reveals the true identity of Ratchet, who is Cassetti. And to this, McQueen seems very surprised, as if he didn't know. And here's what's quite interesting is that we find out that McQueen's father was the district attorney that handled the Armstrong case, so McQueen was quite sympathetic with the Armstrong family. After this, he just recalls what he did the night of the murder, and he says that after dinner, he went to his cabin and read a bit, and at Belgrade, which was the previous stop, he was talking with the colonel, and they even having a really good chat about politics. And so they ended up in McQueen's cabin talking about politics about till 2 a.m. And then the men parted to have some sleep, to which McQueen then only replied that the only thing that he saw is that he saw the woman passing in the red scarlet kimono with the dragons. However, he never saw her pass again or anything else. He also adds that at Vinkovsky's stops, the only two men that got out of the train to stretch their legs, accompanied by the wagonlit conductor, were himself and the Colonel Arbuthnot, but he didn't saw anyone else. And so that's a wrap for chapter 10 or chapter 2 of part 2. Now moving on with chapter 3 of part 2, or as we can call it, chapter 11. Here's what happened. In this chapter we have another interview in which Hercule calls an interview for the valet of Ratchet, who was Enred Henry Masterman, who recalled that he saw Ratchet lastly at 9 p.m. approximately, and that he went to his bed to fold some clothes and to prepare his bed and his water set for cleaning his teeth and getting ready for that, and to give him his sleeping drugs. And that the last instructions he received from Ratchet was to not be awoken or to interrupt it until he rang the bell till the next day, which to his valet it wasn't a surprise because he said that Mr. Ratchet tended to wake up until noon or lunchtime approximately, so it was not weird that he didn't awoke early in the morning. And so afterwards we know that what he did is that he just informed McQueen that Ratchet wanted to see him and that he proceeded to go to his compartment. It was compartment number 4, which he was sharing with Italian. He says that he read approximately till 10:30, and that's when the conductor came to the room and prepared the beds, and well, he couldn't fall asleep because a very bad toothache he had, so he stayed awoke till 4 a.m. approximately. And what we also find out is that he didn't know Ratchet's true identity, but that he did know about the Armstrong case and that he's a cigarette smoker. And lastly, the final detail that we have from the valet is that we know that he knew that Ratchet had a lot of enemies due to when he heard conversations between McQueen and Ratchet. He knew he had been receiving threats, but he never saw something by his own perception, or he witnessed something that threatens Ratchet's life before. And that's about it for chapter 3 or chapter 11. And now moving on to chapter 4 of part 2 of the book, or chapter 12. Now here is how it goes down, and this is our final chapter for this book. In this chapter we have another interview, yet this one is with Mrs. Hubbard, in which in the moment she's called in for questioning, she rushes in and tells Hercule that she has very important news for the case, as she declares that there was a man inside her compartment, and to which she says that she was asleep until she was awoken by some sound, and that she can swear by that there was a man inside her compartment. What we know is that the reaction of Mrs. Hubbard was to press tightly to her bed and to close her eyes and to just ring the bell to call the conductor. and that she had previously asked before to have all the communication between the suite next door closed, as the door had been locked, and she had placed her luggage in front of the door for extra security. However, she swears by that there indeed was a man inside. Interestingly, Mrs. Hubbard found a piece of evidence. She found a button which is identical to the one found in the uniform of the wagon-linked conductor. Afterwards, Hercule asks Mrs. Hubbard if she knew about the Armstrong case. She says that she isn't quite familiar or acquainted with the case, but that she has a really strong opinion about it, and that she's really pissed off that the murderer got to be free. In the final parts of the questioning between Mrs. Hubbard and Hercule, we also find out that neither she owns a red scarlet kimono with dragons, or that she's the owner of the handkerchief because it had an engraved H. So we previously thought that it was of Mrs. Hubbard. However, apparently it is not. And what's quite interesting is that we find out that when she discovers that Ratchet is Cassetti, the murderer of Daisy Armstrong, she feels quite happy and quite excited about it, and so that's a really quite special reaction in this chapter. And that's about it for chapter 4 of part 3, or chapter 12. Okay, so chapter 10 to 12. Now, do I like them? Yes. Personally, they are one of my favorite parts of the book because we're approaching the climax of the story and we're getting closer to solving the murder. And personally, what I love about this part of the book is that we start getting more pieces of information and we're trying to connect the dots, and we're getting more clues, yet we're seeing more connections. We're seeing how most of the people on the train are quite familiar with the Armstrong case, which has allowed us to create some connection between the characters. But we're also starting to see who we can connect to the clues and who doesn't, and we're seeing how the events happened that night, so we're able to have a clear image of who is a possible killer. So to me, it's one of the favorite parts of the book because we're having an insight of what happened to that night. So it's a part when we can really use our imagination to explore and to create theories and to hypothesize what could have happened. And this is a part where we can get creative and think, oh, based on this, I think it's Mrs. Hubbard, or I think it's the colonel, or I think it's Mary. And so in this part of the book, we still have a lot of questions, yet we're starting to resolve some, but we're still missing a lot. We're still missing some interviews, and some parts of the night and some events don't really add up right now. So we still have a lot of mystery and suspense building up. So please stay tuned for the next vlog that's coming, because it's of chapters 13 to 15. And yes, so be prepared because we're getting ready to solve who killed Cassetti on the Orient Express.